Good morning. When I was first thought of a title for today's sermon, I was thinking of the word later. And while later is a very much part of our lives, there's also the word fear. And while later happened for the Israelite people, fear had much to do with why things happened later than God had planned. And when I think of our lives here on this earth today, there are many people today who also live in fear of one kind or another. Sometimes it may be a real fear or a necessary fear, and at other times it may be an imagined fear, or it may be a fear that comes by anticipation of something that may come or be on the verge of happening. For the Israelite people, the trip from Egypt to the land of Canaan should have only taken them a few months at the most. However, the issue that developed came when Moses sent some men to survey the country of Canaan so they would be able to formulate a plan of how to take over the land from the people who were presently living there. And we're going to read some verses from Numbers 13. Now remember, the people of Israel had lived in this country initially, but when there was that incredible famine, the people all moved to Egypt under the rule and auspices of Joseph, and they continued to live in the land of Egypt until God provided a way for them to come out, and God was planning and did eventually get them into the promised land, or the land of Canaan. So let's read some verses from Numbers chapter 13. And I'm starting with verse 17. It says this: When Moses sent the spies to scout out Canaan, he said, "Go up through the Negev and then into the hill country. Look the land over and see what it is like. Assess the people. Are they strong or weak? Are there few or many? Observe the land. Is it pleasant or harsh? Describe the towns where they live. Are they open camps or fortified with walls? And the soil, is it fertile or is it barren? Are there forests? And try to bring back a sample of the produce that grows there. This is the season for the first ripe grapes." Watch that. With that, they were on their way. After 40 days of scouting out the land, the spies returned home to Moses and the people. They presented themselves before Moses and Aaron and the whole congregation of the people in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They reported to the whole congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Then they told the story of their trip. "We went to the land to which you sent us, and oh, it does flow with milk and honey. Just look at this fruit. The only thing is that the people who live there are fierce. Their cities are huge and well fortified. Worse yet, we saw descendants of the giant Anak. Amalekites are spread out in the Negev. Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites hold the hill country, and the Canaanites are established on the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan." Caleb, one of the spies, interrupted and called for silence before Moses and said, "Let's go up and take the land now. We can do it." But the others said, "We can't attack those people. They're way stronger than we are." And they spread rumors among the people of Israel. They said, "We scouted out the land from one end to the other. It's a land that swallows people whole. Everybody we saw was huge. Why, we even saw Nephilim, giants, the Anak giants, come down from Nephilim. Alongside them, we felt like grasshoppers. And they looked down on us as if we were grasshoppers." Fear gripped the greater number of the spies for one reason or another. They allowed it to cloud any thought of what God might be able to do for his people in this situation. It is interesting how even with everything that God had already done for the people since they left Egypt, the 10 had no faith to believe that they could ever possess the land of Canaan. So what may we have as a takeaway of this story for our own lives? I could not help but think how even in our country today there are so many people who are wanting to somehow create a life that used to be, or at least that they think used to be. A life that from their perspective was or is or should be better than what they fear is ahead. Fear is a crippling disease or matter, and it doesn't matter where or when one lets it gain control. Even sometimes in a situation where one needs fear, it becomes paralyzing, and one succumbs to whatever the issue or problem is at the moment, when really they could have fled or gotten away. And so it is here in this situation. There was a greater group that screamed, "We can't!" And the crowd listened, of course, to the majority who were screaming, "We can't." In my study, there were some things suggested that one should be on guard for, so that fear does not take over one's life. First of all, fear comes when one loses their focus upon God. I would call this situation God helping the people of Israel to plan ahead. First of all, they were promised the land that was to be prosperous and rich, a place where they could grow all kinds of crops, as well as a place where there was water and everything that was necessary to have a good life. However, out of 12 people that were chosen to go as scouts, even though they saw all the lush crops, the majority of them got sidetracked by the people that they saw. For whatever reason, and maybe some of it was because of their bad memories from Egypt, the majority were sure that now the residents of the land of Canaan would just kill the Israelites all off. They had absolutely no faith in having any strength or power in their own group of people, the Israelites. As I was thinking about this, I remember back to what we said the population of Israel was, and that it was in the millions. And yet, even with so many people, they had no confidence. Never mind that they had God on their side, who had defeated the Egyptians quite easily. In our own lives, we too can get easily sidetracked by things that come our way. Let us look at some verses in 1 Corinthians 4, verses 5 through 8. So don't get ahead of the master and jump to conclusions with your judgments before all the evidence is in. It's important to look at things from God's point of view. I would rather not see you inflating or deflating reputations based on mere hearsay. For who do you know that really knows you and knows your heart? And even if they did, is there anything they would discover in you that you could take credit for? Isn't everything you have and everything you are sheer gifts from God? So what's the point of all this comparing and competing? You already have all that you need. You already have more access to God than you can handle. Without bringing either Apollos or me into it, Paul says, you're sitting on top of the world, at least God's world. And we're right there sitting alongside you. In these verses, we are reminded that when we get our focus off of God and what He can gift to us and through us, we get fearful. Fear comes when we focus on our own power, strength, and resources. This is so true. For the 10 spies, they totally focused on manpower and resources that they knew were in the camp. But did they forget about the cloud of God's presence? Did they forget of the pillar of fire of God's presence? As we have followed this company of people so far, we have seen that they lend themselves to grumbling and complaining quite readily. But how about you and I? Where does fear and when does fear kick in for us? Particularly fear when it pertains to things that are, or at least seem, out of our control. Let us think about this on a daily perspective. Most of us have the means, the power, the strength, and resources to maintain our daily lives most of the time. For some, however, we may face times when we feel as if we have lost that opportunity, lost that power, or maybe even have had to give up some power. And we may feel as if we too are facing giants that are unconquerable. As I consider the world that you and I live in today, there are so many things that I can think of in this regard. So many people struggle to have the basic necessities of life, whether it is housing, adequate food, medical care, etc. There may be many reasons for this scenario, some being the result of where one lives, or how one lives, or choices that have been made. But in other situations, it is the result of the decisions and choices made by people over which one has no control. And oftentimes, they are people who care little about anyone else but themselves. And when it comes to themselves, they really are those who want everything they can get in their control and power. For those who are struggling, there is no confidence in them at all that God could or would provide help for them. I remember times when I have felt powerless, when it seemed as if there were no resources to obtain the necessities of life. And yet in the end, God made a way of bringing things to me that even to this day, I cannot explain entirely. And if I had known about the resourcing ahead of time, would that have made my decisions any easier? I'm not sure. Or, even if I remember now some of these times, I wonder, would I worry now? Fear is a very real enemy, and it is one that is a sneaky robber and thief. So while I want to judge the 10 spies, I have to wonder at myself, would I have yielded to the majority? Thirdly, fear comes when one thinks, I cannot face it another day, or I can face it another day, but not today. Maybe the spies felt that they needed to do some war preparation before they went to take the promised land. Like get an army of men trained in a boot camp. Is that not what countries do today? Is that not what we think? If it is something that we need to tackle in our own lives, we need to prepare. Recently, in our nation and maybe our world, we had a real shakeup with a disease that gripped the world and its power, that of COVID. It was an enemy that attacked unforeseen, unprepared for, and no one had any attack plan to get at it or put it in its place. Sometimes things come, and one needs to act now, not later. And that is what God wanted the people to be ready to do. Now you know what is ahead for you. So get ready and go take this wonderful land where I want you to live, God says. But the people are huge. The people will pulverize us. Yes, there is much good in crops. It is a fertile land, but the people. So what is it in your life or in my life that we need to focus on today, who could become as these people were to the Israelite spies. Are we ready? Are we able to embrace the God of the Scriptures as we encourage other people to do? And maybe even as we think the spies should have done here in this story? 1 John encourages us to remember who we are and not be fearful, as we know ultimately what is going to happen in the end. 1 John 3, beginning with verse 2, reads like this. But friends, exactly, we are the children of God. And that's only the beginning. Who knows how we'll end up? What we know is that when Christ is openly revealed, we shall see him. And in seeing him, we will become like him. All of us who look forward to this coming of Jesus, stay ready with the glistening purity of Jesus' life as a model for our own lives. And so, what do we do with our fear today? How can we really live in this world today without fear? Honestly, I don't have a magic answer for this. It would be nice if I did. It would be nice if I could give you a pill, or we could take a pill, and it would take away our vulnerability of fear. I do know that some fear is healthy, and it leads us to caring properly for ourselves as well as other people around us. There is also fear that is unhealthy, and my friends, that is where the problem lies. For some people, it renders them powerless to make any realistic and rational decisions. For some, they will embrace the fear and then work through it with God and possibly others, so that it can help them grow and become the person God has destined them to be. And that is what we need to be challenged to do. Sometimes we need to surround ourselves with others who can help make us have the courage to get through our fear. This is where community and family and friends come into play in our lives. So today, what is your greatest fear or your greatest fears? Take some time to think about it. And how may God be with you and help you begin to handle this fear? Is it a healthy fear? Is a question to ask. Or is it an unhealthy fear? Will it bring protection in my life? Or will it cause problems in my life? Can or should I share it with someone? I believe community is a good antidote to helping us not become overwhelmed by fear. Sometimes we say, oh, I'll talk to someone later. I'll do it tomorrow. My friends, in our lives, we need to embrace our fear now. We need to give it to God now, not later. And that's where the 10 spies struggled. They could not embrace God and give their fear to Him. And so they wanted to put off going into the promised land. They chose to encourage the people to stay where they were, in a desert, in the wilderness. When we study the scriptures, there are times when later is not always an option. I was actually thinking about the crucifixion of Jesus, the death and resurrection of Jesus. Later, was not an option. He needed to deal with it in the moment. And I also thought of the fear that gripped Jesus' heart as he agonized in the garden. And then those words as he hung on the cross, my God, why? Why? Why even did you leave me? Jesus knows, my friend, what that fear is like that is gripping your spirit today, or tomorrow, or yesterday, or from years ago. Jesus knows. Can you take that fear, embrace it in your hands, and lift it up and release it to God? God, help us let go of the fear that wants to hold us captive to things in this world. May we embrace your presence and your power and see you at work in our lives and in the lives of people around us. In Jesus' name.